Angelica is completely stunned. Th dash. She looks from the old bald man to the handsome young man sitting behind the desk. This handsome man is the Gluttonous Count? For a moment, Angelica can't believe her luck. But then she quickly realizes her mistake. Not this one. The handsome young man isn't the Gluttonous Count at all. Arjun explains the situation. That person is the master's uncle. Someone must have mistaken the uncle for the master and spread strange rumors. The uncle smirks. Well, it's also possible someone spread them out of malice. And with that, he decides to leave. Well then, I'll take my leave. The uncle walks away, leaving Angelica alone with the real Count Shira. Angelica stares at him, not knowing what to do. I didn't hear anything about such a handsome man being the master. She looks at Shira from the side, her face turning bright red as her heart starts racing. But then she immediately panics. No, this is impossible. My heart can't take this. Just then, Shira calls out to her. Lady Angelica. Eek. Angelica jumps in surprise. Even his voice is handsome. Shira calmly speaks to her. Thank you for listening to my request this time. I'm grateful. Angelica hurriedly waves her hands. No, I'm the one who should be grateful. Not only did you take on my debt, but also decided to marry me. But Shira's response is unexpectedly cold. Then we're done with the conversation. Yes. Angelica is left completely confused. Shira doesn't even look at her as he continues. I'll submit the marriage registration later. Tell Arjun or Lara for anything you need. I'll provide as much as possible. Angelica clearly wants to say something more, but Shira has already dismissed her. He doesn't even look her way. He's not even looking this way though. As Angelica leaves with Arjun, he quietly comments on the situation. Isn't he too indifferent? Then Arjun gives her an explanation. Madam, the master would have married any woman who would have him. Angelica stops. What do you mean? Arjun becomes serious. Actually, there's a custom in the Knightley Count family. The head must always have a wife, no matter the circumstances. So, if the previous wife passes away, they must take a new wife at all costs. Angelica finally understands. I see. No wonder they chose someone like me. She remembers Shira sitting beside his former wife. And just like that, the budding love she had felt for him instantly withers away. Arjun bows his head. I'm sorry for deceiving you. But Angelica doesn't blame him. No, you did nothing wrong. You saved me, that's for sure. After all, when she thinks about it rationally, this is simply a political marriage. But at least her living conditions are now guaranteed. That's already a huge change compared to the life she had before. The servants also seem to be kind. Angelica looks at everyone around her and makes up her mind. She has to accept this. For now, she'll put the rebellion aside. Later, Angelica looks out of the window. Ah, a beautiful garden stretches out behind the mansion. A garden. Should I take a walk to clear my mind? She heads outside. What a beautiful place. The backyard of the mansion is filled with blooming pink and yellow flowers. The gentle wind carries the sweet scent of flowers through the garden. Moreover, the smell of flowers carried by the wind is so good. For the first time in a while, Angelica feels at peace. My troubled heart is healing. But then, snap. A shadow suddenly falls over her. Angelica doesn't seem to notice it yet. Behind a tree, a mysterious dark-haired figure wearing a gray cloak is quietly watching her. Angelica suddenly hears something rustling behind her. She turns around and finds a small girl with dark purple hair and beautiful yellow eyes looking up at her. Who are you, big sister? Angelica looks down at the little girl with a warm smile. Who's this child? She's incredibly cute. But as Angelica looks more closely at her eyes, something catches her attention. So cute. But the shape of the eyes is somehow. Those golden-orange eyes look strangely familiar. They remind Angelica of the young Count Shira. Before she can figure it out, Lara suddenly approaches. Ah, Nej-sama, so you were here. Angelica freezes. Nej? Oh. She immediately realizes who this child is. I knew it. This child is one of the capture characters. Nej Knightley. Angelica looks at the adorable little girl in front of her. So cute, way too cute. But then she remembers Nej's tragic fate. This innocent child will eventually suffer a terrible tragedy during the rebellion and become determined to destroy the kingdom. And in every route except the heroine's route, Nej always dies. Angelica looks at the child with a mixture of awe and dread. To think that such a tragic, beautiful boy would become my son. But there's something that's been bothering her since earlier. Wait, this child looks like a girl, right? Angelica tilts her head in confusion. Then Laura finally introduces her. Angelica-sama. This is Nej-sama, the master's daughter. Angelica's eyes widen. She's really a girl. But in the game, Nej is a boy. Angelica's mind immediately starts going into overdrive. Well, Nej does look and sound androgynous. And there wasn't any skin exposure during the summer event either. Could it be Nej is actually a woman disguised as a man? Angelica starts imagining all sorts of possibilities. But Laura desperately calls out to her. Angelica-sama. Angelica finally snaps out of her Otome game delusion. The truth is much more tragic. Nej lost the reliable adults in her life, along with the place she once called home. And because of that, she chose to live as a man. Angelica can't even imagine how difficult that must have been. Yet, in a strange way, she feels that Nej's situation is somewhat similar to her own. Both of them had been forced to live with loneliness. And in the end, Nej suddenly died. Angelica remembers the tragic fate waiting for this child. She can't accept it. I don't want this child to have such a miserable end. This child. I'll protect her. Angelica makes up her mind. You think I'll wait for the heroine to appear? For that, I'm done being weak and indecisive. But while Angelica is making this dramatic vow in her head, Laura casually says something that completely changes the situation. From today, you are the mother of Nej-sama, Angelica-sama. Nej looks up at Angelica. Mother? She seems a little confused. Then she quietly says the word again. Mother. Angelica's heart melts. Without thinking twice, she suddenly wraps Nej in a tight, loving embrace. Nej is now a child who has a mother too. Angelica holds her close. So cute. Her eyes fill with tears of happiness as she hugs the adorable little girl. But then Angelica suddenly pauses. But this child. She looks down at Nej. Perhaps. Don't you remember your mother? Angelica realizes that Nej hasn't mentioned her real mother even once. And there was something else. Something much bigger that Nej was carrying deep inside her. A letter from Angelica's elder sister arrives one day. Angelica is surprised. Her sister hadn't even shown herself when Angelica returned home, so she has no idea why she suddenly decided to write. But as soon as Angelica reads the letter, she is left completely speechless. Her sister writes that she has heard Angelica is marrying the Gluttonous Count, and as her sister, she is actually happy for her. She then proudly announces that she has also become engaged to a wonderful man, Captain Ryan of the Matisse Knights. Angelica's eyes widen in horror. Captain Ryan. The very same man who had falsely accused her of embezzlement and sent her to face execution. And now, that man is her sister Charlotte's fiancé. Angelica can barely process the absurdity of it. Charlotte even writes that since she has blessed Angelica's marriage, Angelica should bless hers in return. Angelica's mind completely short-circuits. But then she remembers exactly what kind of person her sister is. Charlotte was one hell of a spoiled lady. She was constantly demanding new dresses and accessories because she would get bored of her clothes almost immediately. And whenever something failed to meet her expectations, she didn't hesitate to make someone pay for it. Once, after seeing a vase she didn't like, Charlotte smashed it right in front of a terrified maid. When the maid admitted that she was the one who had prepared it, Charlotte immediately fired her. You're fired. Don't show me your face again. That was the kind of person Charlotte was. And her obsession with handsome men was no better. Even if a man was a commoner, as long as he was good-looking, Charlotte would bring him into the mansion. And if she found out that a handsome man was already married, she would throw a tantrum and even ask their father to break up the couple. Angelica couldn't help but think, are you a soap opera villainess? But Charlotte's cruelty wasn't limited to strangers or servants. She had always looked down on Angelica, her younger sister, and making nasty remarks toward her had become an everyday occurrence. One day, while Angelica was simply standing on the staircase, Charlotte deliberately shoved her from behind. Angelica immediately lost her balance and started falling down the stairs. What? I guess I'm falling. But Angelica refused to let that happen. As if I would. She somehow managed to catch herself and land safely. That was seriously dangerous. Yet despite everything Charlotte did to her, their parents simply turned a blind eye. They were extremely lenient with their precious daughter. Angelica could never understand it. Why were they so warm and loving toward Charlotte, yet so cold toward her? For a long time, she used to wonder about it. But eventually, Angelica became accustomed to being treated that way. She simply stopped expecting anything from them. And then, suddenly, she snapped back to the present. Huh. Laura, who was standing nearby, immediately jumped in surprise. And madam? What is it this time? Suddenly, Angelica remembers something. I remembered. Laura jumps in surprise. What did you remember? Angelica's mind flashes back to the day before she was arrested. That voice she heard coming from Ryan's room. Oh, Ryan-sama, you're such a spoiled child. Angelica's eyes widen. It was definitely Charlotte. She had been so panicked at the time that she never realized it. So the woman she heard in Ryan's room that night was her own sister. Angelica turns toward Laura. Laura. Why yes. Can you prepare a bazooka? There are a few people I'd like to blast right now. Angelica imagines herself blowing Ryan and Charlotte to pieces. Laura stares at her in confusion. A bazooka, you mean? The next day, at the Knightley Mansion dining room, Angelica walks in, feeling surprisingly refreshed. The bed was so fluffy. I slept well. Then she notices Nedge already sitting at the dining table. Nedge, you're eating already? Good kid. But Nedge simply looks away. Humph. A moment later, her expression suddenly brightens. Good morning, mother. Yes, good morning, Nedge. Angelica looks at her carefully. You don't seem very energetic. Is it just my imagination? Then she notices something else. Shira-sama still isn't there. Angelica looks toward his empty seat. Shira-sama isn't here yet. Laura explains. The master is having his meal in his room. In his room. Angelica is stunned. Is it always like this? Doesn't he eat with his daughter? Laura awkwardly tries to explain. Yes, he's busy with work, so. Angelica realizes she may have let her irritation show. Oops. Did my irritation show? She quickly forces herself to smile. Smile, smile. For the cute daughter. But there is something she still wants to say. Angelica looks serious. Understood. But sometimes, we'd be happy if he could join us for a meal. Then she turns toward Nedge. Nedge also wants to have a meal with her father, right? Honestly, Angelica herself doesn't really care. But for Nedge, Shira is her father. However, Nedge looks down at her plate. I don't really understand. Angelica is confused. Maybe Nedge simply can't express her feelings properly. Angelica gently asks. Nedge, do you not like your father? But then Laura explains something that concerns her even more. Nedge-sama can only eat this much. Really? Angelica looks at the tiny amount of food in front of Nedge. Is she a picky eater? Well, Nedge quietly scoops up a tiny bit of soup. She takes one sip, then another small bite of bread. And that's it. I'm full. Nedge puts down her spoon. Angelica's jaw drops. What? Just one sip of soup and one bite of bread. She hasn't eaten anything at all. Nedge quietly gets up from her chair. Angelica watches her walk away from the table. Then she notices something. Nedge is crying. A large tear rolls down the little girl's cheek. Angelica freezes. She's crying. Nedge continues walking toward the door. Angelica abruptly stands up, her chair scraping against the floor. But before she can follow her, Laura appears. Madam, leave Nedge-sama to us. Madam, please have your meal. Angelica reluctantly sits back down. Even if you say that. She looks at the empty plate in front of her. I'm worried, so I can't eat. Angelica sits alone at the huge dining table, unable to stop thinking about Nej. And after that, Nej didn't come back to the dining room. In the end, Angelica couldn't bring herself to eat anything and returned to her room. Laura, there's nothing special for you to do here, so you can go and take care of something else. But Laura firmly refused. No. The master told me to always stay by your side. Angelica is stunned by her dedication. Then Laura suddenly looks worried. If I did something. I'm sorry. She immediately drops to her knees and bows deeply. Angelica is completely caught off guard. But then she realizes something. Now that she thinks about it, she is technically a criminal in their eyes. Of course they'd put her under surveillance. Angelica suddenly imagines herself as a prisoner being watched by a spy. So that's why Laura is always following her around? Angelica decides not to make a big deal out of it. I understand Shira-sama's feelings. So please don't worry too much about it. Laura looks confused. What? Do you know about Joanna-sama? Joanna? Angelica has no idea who she's talking about. Was there even a character named Joanna in Majolov? Laura suddenly realizes what Angelica is asking and panics. Damn it. What? Is she related to the one whose name must not be mentioned? Angelica stares at her, completely confused. But there is no time to think about it. Nej has run off. Nej-sama. Please wait. Angelica immediately starts running after her. Let's go. Eventually they catch up with Nej. But she is standing right in front of Count Shira. Shira looks at Angelica with a stern expression. You left your meal unfinished again. Nej stands behind a maid, sniffling and avoiding her father's gaze. Shira continues lecturing her. At least eat everything that is served. I told you so many times. At this rate, you'll be malnourished again. Nej looks completely distressed. I don't want to eat. But Shira doesn't seem to notice her feelings. You're troubling the maids with your selfishness. Nej's head slowly drops. Her face disappears into the shadow. And then, what? Father, you're stupid. Nej suddenly pushes past the maid and runs away crying. Shira freezes. He looks completely stunned by her outburst. For a moment, nobody says anything. Angelica looks at the scene in horror. This is a major conflict. Nej's refusal to eat is clearly much more serious than Angelica initially thought. But even so, scolding her without trying to understand the reason behind it is only making things worse. Angelica turns toward Laura. Hey Laura, why doesn't Nej eat her meals? Laura hesitates before answering. The doctor said she seems to have a fear of food. Angelica's eyes widen. Fear of food? Did something happen to her? Angelica immediately wants to know more. You're gonna feign silence. I want you to tell me about it. She begins thinking seriously about the problem. Fear of food. There must be some way to create an environment where Nej feels safe enough to eat. Now, let's think together. Angelica and Laura start brainstorming. 1 hour later. Angelica is completely exhausted. I can't think of anything. Angelica sighs. I have no experience raising children. But then again, she has made various dishes that children might like before. She remembers trying to feed Nej a table full of food, only for the girl to sit there looking scared and refuse to eat. Even trying to feed her in her room didn't seem to help. Nej still looked nervous and wouldn't touch the food. It doesn't seem to be in her room either. If only I knew the reason why she's scared. That would be good. Let's try thinking from my own perspective. Angelica crosses her arms and starts thinking seriously. What would scare me at mealtime? She sits on the sofa, holding a teacup as she ponders the question. Someone eating my portion without asking. A painful memory suddenly comes to mind. She remembers Ryan greedily shoveling food into his mouth while she watches in horror, bringing back the trauma caused by her parasitic ex-boyfriend. And then, Angelica's eyes become sharp as she thinks even more deeply. Laura, give me something to write with. She suddenly snaps her fingers, as if she has just thought of something. Laura immediately agrees. Okay. Angelica quickly starts writing something down on a piece of paper. Scratch, scratch. Once she's finished, she hands the note to Laura. Prepare what is written here. Understood. Laura looks at the note, then back at Angelica with a puzzled expression. But What are you planning to get made? I'm not asking someone else to do it. We will make it ourselves. Angelica proudly places a hand on her chest with a confident smile. Now, let's go. With that, Angelica cheerfully heads forward, while Laura follows behind her, looking slightly lost. Soon, Angelica and Laura enter a massive, professional kitchen filled with chefs in white uniforms. Good day. Could we borrow the kitchen for a bit? The chefs exchange awkward glances. Madam. Well. Angelica immediately notices their uncomfortable expressions. They look very unhappy. She starts wondering why they're acting like this. By any chance, are countesses not allowed to cook? No, that's not it. However, another chef simply stands there in silence. The chefs look frozen, clearly uncomfortable with refusing a noblewoman. Please wait a moment. They quickly turn their backs and begin whispering among themselves. Angelica watches them closely. All right. Are they worried that we might mess up their workplace? Seeing how uneasy they are, Angelica decides to offer them a compromise. If you're that uneasy, you can assign someone to watch me. How about that? If that's the case, the chefs look at one another relieved. All right. Angelica pumps her fist into the air with a huge smile before giving them a small bow. Thank you. With everything settled, Angelica ties her long white hair back into a high ponytail with a blue ribbon. Swish. All right, let's do it. A fired-up Angelica gets straight to work. The vegetables and meat are all fresh. She looks over the ingredients with a satisfied grin. It's worth cooking. Angelica picks up her knife and starts skillfully slicing a carrot. Chop! But even though she told the chefs to keep watch, she can't help but feel a little awkward. I told them to keep watch, but... Angelica closes her eyes with a nervous smile. The chefs, Laura, and even a butler are all standing in a semicircle around her, intensely watching her every move. Isn't this too much? Angelica looks around at everyone staring at her while she kneads a giant ball of dough. It's hard to make things from scratch that you can easily buy at the supermarket. I'm envious of modern people. She vigorously presses down on the dough. Laura watches her with growing admiration. Madam, could it be? You have experience in cooking. Angelica rolls out the dough with a wooden pin, looking completely calm and professional. Yes, when I was at my parents' home, I prepared meals for my family. As she continues working the dough, Angelica suddenly has another thought. It seems they don't know. So let's keep my work in the nights a secret. She gives a knowing wink, while a small chibi Arjun smiles beside her. After some time, Angelica finally finishes the preparation. The prep work is finally done. She wipes her forehead and lets out a huge sigh of relief. Then she turns toward Laura. Hey there, please bring Nedge here. And prepare a high chair. Understood. But what are you planning to do? Laura smiles politely, clearly curious about Angelica's plan. Angelica responds with a warm, brilliant smile. I want her to help with the final touches. The moment the chefs hear this, they panic. We can't let Nedge-sama use fire. Of course not. Angelica quickly reassures them with a dismissive wave of her hand. Then she reveals a tray filled with neat, pre-cut, cylindrical pieces of white dough. This is her job. Is this? Angelica proudly holds up a perfectly round, smooth ball of dough in her cupped hands, smiling radiantly.